Hello, I'm Ashton,
I'm Kayla.
and welcome back to another interview of Taylor Swift, but make it horror, where Kayla and I both take Taylor Swift songs and turn them into horror stories. This particular interview is going to be about A Lover's Tick, written by Kayla, and this one is about Cruel Summer, or inspired by Cruel Summer. So, do you want to give a brief summary of what this is about, or a teaser, whichever you would like? Because, by the way, if you are watching this, this does contain spoilers, so I would recommend watching the video first, which is up on her channel.
A Lover's Tick, as you said, is inspired by the song Cruel Summer, and it is about a young man named Bobby who is at the lake during the summer, 4th of July, and he sees somebody watching him from the dock. And he comes to realize that it is an ex-flame from high school who disappeared, and he hadn't seen him in 4 years, and everyone kind of thought he was dead. So Bobby is very curious of where he's been and ends up leaving his friend to kind of, what would you say?
Reconcile.
Yeah, and some weird shit happens.
Indeed.
Mhm.
So, right off the bat, I really like how you just open up the story. Your descriptions. I know that that's not necessarily what you think is your strength as a writer, but an explosion of fireworks momentarily painted the lake neon pink before the water returned to its blackened state. You're also just talking about how the booms pounded, the sky sizzled, and it was just some really good writing at the very beginning of this.
Thank you. I really wanted to add color in there because even though we're talking about the song Cruel Summer, the Lover album is very colorful. And even though
Yes.
that's more of a pastel kind of pink on the cover, it's just I wanted to incorporate the colorfulness of the album, I guess.
See, and that makes sense. Lover's not necessarily my favorite album by Taylor Swift. I like it, and you've helped me appreciate it more. But while I was listening to, or while I was reading the story, I didn't like initially pick up on Cruel Summer. Like, I almost kind of forgot that this was inspired by Cruel Summer.
Yeah.
And I was kind of curious, like, what elements, this is more of a inspired. Sometimes we do like more direct lyrics, but this one kind of seemed like it was more inspired by. So kind of how did you get the idea from this, and like what did you incorporate from Cruel Summer into the story?
I really wanted like a vampire story, like for some reason. And the
Please
main
do whatever.
line that kind of inspired that was the I'm drunk in the back of the car and I cried like a baby coming home from the bar, and then he looks up grinning like a devil. So that was the main inspiration, and then I kind of just pulled from that and like developed it around there. Like, okay, I know I want him to be in the back of a car. I want vampires. So instead of being like drunk, like obviously he's been drinking, but I want it to like let me just put some vampire venom in there and he'll be drunk
Right.
off of vampire venom. And so I kind of formed the story more so around like just that part of the song.
That makes sense. I don't think I would have looked at Cruel Summer and thought vampire. Like, did you already just know you wanted to do the vampire story, or was it like that one line?
It was that like line, like I knew eventually I wanted something to do with vampires because I do like vampires.
Yeah.
And obviously we grew up I grew up watching Buffy. We grew up during the whole Twilight craze, Vampire Diaries, when vampires were like all the rage. Not that they're ever out, but you know, there are times when they're more popular, and I feel like when we were younger they were a lot more popular
Yes.
for a time. So I knew I eventually wanted to, but really like the grinning like a devil is where I don't know. I was just like, vampire.
No, it's fair. So at the beginning of the story, like I'm kind of picturing, even though they're not at camp, like, it kind of, like, reminded me, like, setting up, like, Friday the 13th. It's just, like, cool, they're at this lake, like, something's going to happen, and then there's this guy that hasn't been around for a while, and he's presumed to be dead, by everybody. So I know that you kind of like make it so they talk for like a little bit more beforehand, but how long has he been like standing there watching him? Like, is this like a very targeted prey?
Since, as we said, there are spoilers, he is a vampire, so he was just kind of gone for a while, out of town. And when he came back, my idea of it was he was probably, since he was like starting a thing with Bobby back in high school, like my thing was he was probably on his way to see him at some point, and that's when he kind of got snatched up by some vampires. And so he was probably had Bobby on his mind. So coming back to town, that was probably the last person on his mind before he died. So it was a very like intentional attack, but it's not to say that he wouldn't kill anybody else if they got in his way.
Gotcha. Because like the vibe is very flirty, like between the two of them, and you have like this great line that's like basically like Bobby's thinking, maybe I should ask him some questions about like where he's been, like before like things really start up. Like he did disappear for 5 years and just like, is that really what you want to like spend your time doing is asking these questions? So is there because, like, like you mentioned, we have very romantic vampires that
Mhm.
grew up with. Was there any part of Asher, the vampire, who was still kind of had feelings for Bobby, or was this just like strictly, I know how to get to Bobby?
Yeah, basically, I know how to get to him. For some reason, I'm not a fan of really like I enjoy reading and watching stuff that has like vampires with their souls and the feelings, and they can be good vampires. But for some reason, when I write vampires, I tend to like for them to be, I don't know, just bad. um, so it was no, he doesn't really have any care for Bobby anymore. It's just he knew he wanted to get to him because he came back to town, and because that's
Yeah.
who he was thinking of last. And yeah.
So later in the story, you kind of picture or you kind of describe Asher as looking not like beautiful at all. Like he's like grotesque, he's kind of bloated. Is this version of vampire, was that kind of like intentional? Was he using his glimmer to kind of like make himself look more attractive and he always looked like that? Or how exactly did that work?
The way that I kind of pictured it, like I remember hearing on a podcast, Hexes, Horrors, and Haunts. My friend's wife used to do a podcast. It's not active anymore, but she was doing an episode on vampires, and she was talking about, I think, how they used to be like very bloated and sickly, purple kind of looking. And I looked it up, and what I saw was like that, like older vampires, like from older tales, like apparently looked that way because they had drank blood. And I really liked that because I hadn't really seen that before. I'm sure that there are stories out there that have it, and I just like only really know the super popular ones that like where the vampires are beautiful. But
That's fair.
so I thought that that was kind of cool, and I wanted to do that. And even though he's got a purplish tint to him, I thought it also fit the line of like the shape of your body is blue.
That's fair. That is very fair. It's convenient that that line worked out for your story.
Mhm. Oh, and before I forget, there was actually another line, and it's like way further on where he sees him, and it says he can see his outline. I initially had like the shape of his body was like something about the darkness, and that his outline. I was like, oh, shape of your body and outline's the same thing, so I'm just gonna use the word outline. So
No,
that
that's
almost made another kind of appearance.
yeah, and speaking of not making your stories, like, too long, this is your shortest story that you've ever written? Like, in general or just for Taylor Swift but Make It Horror?
in, in general.
Dang. So, what was it about this one? Was it just, like, you wanted to challenge yourself, or was the story, like, kind of, like, feeling more condensed in your head?
I think, as you know, like before, because we took a 2 month break, but like started writing this before we decided to take a break, and I was just, as you know, I was burned out at that point. Like I even like, you know, the story before that one that I did, I was already burned out. And so that was mainly why I was like, I need to learn how to write them shorter anyway, and I'm not in the mood to write. So let me just try it with this one, which is actually a lot harder for me, but like that was kind of Like I two things of me being burned out and then also really knowing that I need to learn how to write shorter stories.
Yeah. What did you find the most challenging about making it more condensed?
I didn't spend as much time with my characters as I liked to
Yeah.
do, and I felt like I didn't really have a lot of, emotional, like any much emotion to give to people, like, or attachment to when it came to the characters, and I was just like, "Wow, this is all just happening so fast," and I'm not really spending, like it's, like, only 8 pages, so there's not too much time with them, like, can anybody even really, like, feel anything for them when there's, like so it was like I'm just used to spending a lot more time with my characters, and I didn't really have that, so that was probably the
That's fair. Because I know you're planning on doing, a lot of these stories, going back, editing them, getting some beta readers to look at them. Is this one of those stories that you would expand so that way you could get more attachment to them, or is there a character you wish you would have spent more time on?
Yeah, I don't think that I would make it too much longer, but I did have, a friend read it, and it was actually one of the things that I was surprised no one else pointed out. I was like, "Hmm, I kinda brought Abigail in, and then I never brought her back in, but if no one else is gonna point it out, then I'm gonna leave it be." But she told me, "Make sure to make Abigail pay off." So, I feel like I need to incorporate Abigail, even if it's just, like, in one more part. And
Right,
then
like it's 1
also
AM and it's time for her to come find him.
yeah, well, I almost had him call her, but then I was like, "But wouldn't that kinda make him stupid not calling the cops and just calling his friend who she needs him to get home anyway?" So, like, I don't wanna make him stupid, so I had him call the cops instead, and then I just was trying to make it short, so I couldn't figure out how to tie her back in. And then my other thing is I know the other thing was, she wished that there was, like even if it was just, like, a couple lines or something, something more to give us more, like tension or something between them, like sexual tension or like some sort of like motivator aside from him being away for so long. Like, why was Bobby so compelled to like, aside from his disappearance? But like, so if I can find like a way to kind of fix those issues, but
Gotcha. See, like, I know you and I have talked about this a lot because initially both of us really wanted to touch on YA, and you have your YA trilogy that you were working on. And, like, there's just so much emotion with teenagers that I'm not surprised at all, like, that Bobby and his, like, little dumbass and, like, Abigail are just like, "Yep, this guy's been gone for 5 years." We were 17 then, we're, 22 now, which shout out to 22.
Mhm.
Um,
Wish I made that intentional.
and so, yeah, I'm gonna go talk to this guy and, like, see
Mm.
what's up, and then, like, completely forget anything because you're like, "Wow, like, I remember, like, how into you I was, and I wanna
Yeah.
get back into that."
Teenagers, young adults, young 20 somethings, they have a lot of emotions.
Yes.
Not that I don't, but
So, like, initially you sent me, like, the written version, and now I've listened to the spoken version. You've, like, added, like, a little bit more time for them talking to each other before they got into the car. I was kind of wondering, like, what were they talking about, like, kind of, like, during that in-between time, or was it just kind of, like, very, like, flirty the entire time, and you just did not want to, like, add that before they go back to, like, this mysterious driver that's been waiting for Asher?
mm. I mean, in my head, they were very, Asher's, like, giving him drinks, and though Bobby's not, like, drunk out of his mind or anything, it was more so just, like, a very flirty thing leading up to before, "Hey, yeah, I'm gonna ask him this stuff after, but I don't wanna ask right away, I don't wanna make it awkward," like, um, so and I didn't really wanna, like, play all that out because I don't like
No,
when
that's
people,
fair.
especially with it being a shorter story, I was like, I'm sure they can imagine what 2 drunk people are saying or doing.
Yes. So then they make it to the car, and what is going on with this driver? Like, is
Um,
this an Uber or
no, I have not decided. I know that it's one of 2 options, but I just haven't decided, and I'll leave it up for other people to decide if they want to. But for me, it's either someone who I don't know if outside of the Vampire Diaries, if compelling people is something vampires can typically do in other stories. I'd imagine that it's in other stories too.
I think it's in Dracula.
Okay. Like So in my head, it's either somebody that he's like compelled to do that, and so he's just kind of doing whatever, or it's like another vampire friend that's just along for the ride and just like, oh, you want to cause some chaos? Okay, let me pretend to be your chauffeur.
That's fair. And then but that's only to a certain point before he kicks them out of the car for doing whatever they are doing, or was that also part of, like, Asher's grand scheme?
Yeah, that was basically getting them to an isolated location and being like, peace, see you later, Usher.
Gotcha. And I like how Asher is, like, very cat-like, where he's just, like, basically playing with his victim, like, he keeps, like, nibbling at him slightly, and then, like, there's, like, a little bit of a break, and then there's, like, more nibbling, and then he just, like, lets him run and makes him think that he can actually refraining from quoting Twilight right here, but running away from him. And then there's, like, some very interesting hallucinations that he has, and I thought you did, like, a very good job building up the tension of him, like, running to the restroom, and obviously, he's not gonna be safe in there either, but all of this strange stuff is happening, he's just, like, hallucinating, like, the snake, like, the toilet's, like, surging, and there's, like, this gross stuff on his hands, like,
Yeah.
why did you bring in the hallucinations? Like,
Uh, well, I needed a way to also tie in. I was at the hospital before I like even started writing this because this was actually the second story that I wanted to do, and I was like, but
for
I need
Cruel
to.
Summer?
I wanted this to be my second story in this series, but I was like, I need to wait
Okay,
until summer. Like, I don't want to do this during the winter. Um,
fair.
so I was at the hospital, and I'm trying to think if I was even done with the house held by Ivy at this point. Probably, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, it was very early on in this project, and I was waiting and the door to the bathroom was open, and you know how like the lighting in bathrooms can sometimes just be weird and kind of more
Yeah,
like dark and like hazy than like instead of like, nice bright great light. And I saw like the soap dispenser, and for some reason my brain was just like picturing someone going to wash their hands and like bodily fluids or pus or something just coming out of it instead of soap, and I was like, "Oh, that was a
gross.
weird vision. I'm gonna put that in the story."
Yeah, I that does not sound like a fun trip to the hospital for you.
I mean, I thought it was fine.
Okay. As a horror writer, I or even before I started writing horror, like, I just had, like, little mini hallucinations, I guess, like that, or, like, where my imagination kind of runs wild. Do you find that happening to you a lot also?
Yes, I have something that I really want to put into a story that I don't know if it happened how many months ago at this point, but it was very rainy, and I had I'm not gonna say what happened, but it was very rainy out, and I was just like, "Man, wouldn't this suck if," and I was just like, "Oh, well, I need to put that in the story." So, like,
Nice.
that happens at, like, very random moments. I was about to say what it was, but I was like, "I'll save it."
Yeah, for whenever that gets put into another one.
Yeah.
And then if I possibly remember, I'll be like, "Oh, wow, you brought this up during Cruel Summer."
Yeah.
Or A Lover's Tick. Oh, yeah, A Lover's Tick. So, the title, where exactly did that come from?
Look, I love the album Lover, but, like, I'm also aware that's very, optimistic and very cheesy at times, and I was like, well, why not just have, like, a cheeseball title? Like, I was like, "Let me how do I incorporate the word lover into the title?" And then I was like, "Ah, like, vampires are kinda like ticks. Let me just put a K at the end of it to seem more like a parasite and just a lover's tick." So I was like, "Yeah, that's cheesy enough. Let's go with that."
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have not figured out what song I want to do off of this album, so we will see. I'm just like, "Ooh, I have another idea for Reputation." It's just like, "Chill out, Ashton."
Yeah, no, that's fair. Have to force myself to stray away from folklore and evermore sometimes, so
Yeah. So we have covered a lot of the story, but was there anything that you wanted to highlight from your story?
Oh, yeah. The thing about the vending machines, I don't know if there are parks at vending machines. There wasn't one in my park growing up. Like maybe a more city-like park, but not the park in my small town. I was just like, the only reason I put vending machines in so that he could die in the vending machine's glow is because hanging your head low in the glow of the vending machine.
I mean, it
Um,
seems like something that should be in a park.
yeah, I guess I haven't spent a lot of times in parks recently, but the ones that I've been to recently haven't had them, and I'm like, is there whatever, there's one here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a very random question, and they probably have absolutely no relation to each other. But for some reason, I was really thinking that the setting for the story was in the same exact town as Girl in the Weeds. Is that accurate at all?
No, but we can pretend like it is.
Okay, because I was like, "Hmm,
Yeah.
they're at a park again." This park keeps coming up in or a park keeps coming up in random stories. I wonder if they are related to each other in any ways, shape, or
No.
form, or if she just likes parks.
Yeah, I just like parks. I haven't really tied anything in yet. I've actually thought of a way to tie in something into like a later story for the one that I'm doing in October, but I haven't decided if I want to do that yet.
Okay,
But you know, so
fair. I'm very excited for your next story.
yeah, I'm had a lot of fun writing the first draft. Now I'm working on it and trying to like make it more well written, and I'm having a bit of a time with it, but we'll see.
Yeah, you still have time.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking forward to a version where Abigail comes in. Oh, and I wanted to also, while we're here, do a shout out to all of your different voice actors because you used a bunch of them in this.
Did. So, yeah, I didn't know if we wanted to do that or not because oh yeah, that's coming out on the same day. Never mind. So or for your channel, it's on the same day. So we have Baron for the main narrator and the character of Asher, and if I were smart, I would have had him to be the main narrator and Bobby because it's from Bobby's point of view, but I didn't quite think about that. But anyway, he works for both of them, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's
And
okay. We love us some Baron voice
yeah.
acting.
And then there was Michael from the We Love Horror podcast, and he also has a channel on here. Anything and Everything Horror, I think is what it's called, who played the part of Bobby, and he did a very good job. So, can't be upset that I didn't think of it earlier. Like, I'm sure he would have done a good job with Asher too. So anyway, they both did very good jobs. And then my mom was the 911 dispatcher, and my poor mom was getting over the sickness that we shall not mention on the internet. But like my poor mom was getting over the sickness and her voice was so like still like cracking and everything. And so like I felt bad. I was like, I can do this part. But anyway, she did it even though she had a cracking voice. So shout out to my mom.
Way
And
to
then
go.
I was Abigail because, well, I mean, I guess I'm a chick who has a voice, so I guess I can do that. So
Wow. That's impressive.
I know,
I mean, honestly, like what it takes to be a voice actor nowadays.
right? Just a person with a voice.
Indeed.
Not
Well,
really.
you definitely have one.
Yes, I still have it, as you can tell, since I'm still speaking.
I can. Good job.
Anyway, shout out to Baron, Michael, and my mom. You guys did fantastic, and I'm very appreciative, so thank you. And I will definitely be looking at them again in the future if I have other projects that I need actors for.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you guys. If you have made it this far, we very much appreciate you. And the playlist for the rest of our stories will be down below in the description. And next month, you can come back on September 13th when I will be covering All Too Well. All right. Well, thank you for watching. We're both very bad at outros, and goodbye.